So now let's move on to AOSP device management. So the new way of deploying Android devices, and Microsoft makes sure that you will see this. Probably now it's less important, but when Microsoft started to bring new firmware, they were making sure that people understand this, because you have to do configuration. If you don't do any configuration, you won't be able to have your Teams devices on Android to be able to log in to your tenant. So Microsoft makes sure that you know about this, and everywhere in the Teams Admin Center portal, you will see all of these messages pop up. Now, let's talk a little bit about this AOSP device management. What is it essentially? It's an Android open source project, which means Microsoft added to this project and made sure that all the right capabilities are in this platform for managing devices, certainly for Teams, but not only for Teams. So the Teams devices, so the Microsoft Teams devices, they use this AOSP platform, and it replaces basically the Android device administrator, which was used previously, but it is deprecated technology, and there are no updates anymore, and Intune is going to remove this capability altogether. So Intune has this OSP device management, and it will be used for all of the Android-based team devices, meeting rooms, phones, panels, and whatever device may come out in the future. So this will make sure they can enroll in Intune. Now, why is this necessary? Because, I mean, you can use Google Android Services or Google Android Enterprise, but this is targeted for smartphones, not for Teams devices. So Teams devices do not have this capability. So the Google mobile services are not supported on those devices. So this is why we need this new capability. And what is even more important, it's a new firmware, and it's a completely different operating system from perspective of the device administrator. Yeah, and also we don't need to have any licensing changes. Whatever worked before still works, and we can migrate Android device administrator devices to AOSP device management. So again, Microsoft making sure announcing this correctly, but what's more important is that Microsoft is pushing devices automatically. So Microsoft is pushing, whether you're ready or not, in a finite number of days. So you can postpone a little bit, but not too much. And I don't think it is possible now to postpone it. So we have to configure this AOSP device management. So how do you do this? So it's Team Device Enrollment. So it's an Android enrollment capability. So it's Android open source project, corporate owned user associated devices. So that's, we have to enable. So how do you do this? We create a profile. So this profile is basically the bare minimum that we have to do. So you name it, you give a description, but the important part is this token expiration and this setting for Microsoft Teams devices. So we have to enable this. I wouldn't enable the Wi-Fi configuration here, but this token expiration is a very important one. And that makes sure that we can enroll in AOSP device management. Now you see, by default, it creates a token and it is 65 years valid. So normally this should be more than enough, but I mean, you can also replace it, but you cannot have two of those profiles. So either you delete the first one and create a new one, but I mean, 65 years is plenty of time. So it applies to all of the Teams devices, not only the meeting rooms, also to the phones and also to the Teams panels. Now, what else that you should do is create a device management policy where we can say device health, device properties, system security. We can do some settings there, but at the end of the session, I have some more details on what you should do and what you should not do from respect to settings. And then we can go into the Teams admin center and manage the devices. So the Teams rooms are still managed by the Teams admin portal. And for example, you see here, there's a firmware and it has really an exclamation mark. If you push this firmware and it says AOSP, so you need to have some prerequisites done. So the slides before are the prerequisites. So this enrollment in AOSP has to be enabled for this. Otherwise, you will not be able to register this device. And same for this other device here. We also have AOSP that we can deploy. And you have to make sure that everything is configured correctly. So in the past, we had to migrate from Android Device Administrator to Android AOSP. And I have one example here. So there's one room here, which is compliant, but it still has Android Device Administrator, which is the legacy way of getting those devices integrated in Intune. And then when we deploy this firmware and we have all the prerequisites set, then it gets deployed. And you will see that it turns into Android AOSP device so that we have successfully migrated this. So let's quickly check this in Intune. So what we do is we go to devices, Android, and then we select enrollment. There you will see Android open source project, AOSP, and corporate-owned user-associated devices. So I already have a policy here. And mind, you can only have one policy. And let's look at the properties. So what we have here is, so I have a name, description, we have this token expiration, and it expires in 2090, so we have plenty of time. We enable it for Teams devices. And I'm not going to apply device name templates here. So that's the bare minimum that you have to do. You don't really need to do compliance policies and conditional access policies, but you can, right? Now, I do have a compliance policy here. And there are not so many settings configured at this point. Let me see, like minimum OS, we want to block rooted devices, and we require encryption, for example, and we apply it to all of the AOSP devices. We have a specific group for that. So all the resource accounts are in here. So the next section is Autopilot and Intune integration. So why would we want to use Autopilot with Teams rooms on Windows? Because we have an Autopilot solution and an auto login solution. So the Autopilot solution is integrated into Intune, and Autopilot and auto login is integrated into the Pro Management Portal. But it lets you set up Teams rooms on Windows very, very quickly without any intervention, and everyone could set up the device somewhere in the room, in the meeting room, and then everything is going to be triggered from remote location. So very easy to set up a device, and then all the updates will be installed, all the configuration will be done, the Teams Rooms application will be deployed, and all of the configuration for the Teams meeting app will be done. So very important for this is actually Microsoft is working together with the OEMs because when you buy those rooms and when you buy a lot of rooms, you want those OEMs or your partners to upload this information into Intune so that you can select those devices and configure them for autopilot for rooms devices. Now, in my case, I don't have a vendor that sold me a device, so you can also do this manually if you want, but then you need to run some scripts on the device to get the autopilot hardware ID. Now you need to run all of these scripts. You need to install some packages, some modules, some other scripts to actually get this information. But once you have this information, we export it to a CSV that we need to configure it in the Intune autopilot environment. Now, there are many steps if you want to do this. If you want to set up this autopilot with Intune. We don't have time today for doing this during this session, so I'm going to skip this for another session. But there are 9 steps before you can actually do this. And I basically skip all of the steps because this session takes probably like 30 minutes for you to set this up. So I'm probably going to do another session around this. But once we have configured all of these steps, we can actually do this. Well, we hope the OEM has uploaded the hardware IDs into the Intune portal. But I mean, I have to do it manually. So that's also something you can do. But the OEM probably would have uploaded all of the devices in here. But for me, it's empty. So what I can do is add autopilot device because I ran the script and I export it to a CSV. I select the CSV file and I upload it to autopilot. So I uploaded it, but then we still have to do some work because there's no group tag available here and there's no profile assigned. So there will not be a profile assigned unless I change the group tag. So I have to change the group tag. Here it is empty and I put MTR dash and a room name or location, doesn't really matter. It just has to be MTR dash. So once this has been configured, you will see that autopilot picks up this group tag and then applies the profile to the autopilot configuration. So we have done this. So I changed the group tag to MTR-room1 in this case. And then at some point, a few minutes later, the profile will be assigned. So it means from that point on, it's ready to be configured as an autopilot device for Teams rooms. Now it's not finished here because we have to go to the Pro portal to actually make sure we have the configuration in place. So we go to the Pro portal. And then in Windows Autopilot devices, you will see this autopilot that I have uploaded, this device. If it doesn't show, then you can sync here. But I mean, now it is ready to be configured for autopilot for Teams rooms. So you see there's a profile assigned, but there's no provisioning status yet, and there's no assigned account. So we need to configure it so that, I mean, we can do a hands-off deployment. So we click on this device. So we see profile assignment status is assigned, but there is no account configured yet. So this we do. So we say configure, we do device selection. We only have one here, so but potentially have a long list. You can search based on some tags or configurations. So you select your right device and then you say account selection. So which of the resource accounts you're going to apply to this Intune autopilot configuration for Teams rooms. I'm going to apply this one. And then a very interesting one is that what are we going to do with the password? Now the password can be generated automatically. So there will be a password reset, and then any existing password will be removed. Now, this is a good option, but keep in mind that this automatically generated password is very long. You cannot remember it because it's all complex characters. I believe it's probably like 50 characters or something, but you can also use an existing password if you want. Now, this is a good solution because you don't really want other people to know what is the actual account for this resource account or the password for this resource account. And it's going to be managed by the admin portal itself. So in this case, we have the auto-generated passwords. We have the device selection. We say, okay, this is the device we're going to configure, and this is the account. So once we do this, you can still download the password, but the password is very complex. I don't have it here, I think. But then you see the autopilot configuration has been completed. The profile has been assigned. The provisioning status is ready. And the account going to be used is this account. So basically, you can now plug in this meeting room somewhere in your organization, and it would automatically pick up all of the information. It will rename the device, MTR serial number. It will apply the local admin password. It will apply the local admin group membership, and it will automatically configure it. It will automatically install the Teams Rooms application. It will automatically configure the Rooms account. And so provisioning is very, very easy. Now, if you go back to Intune, then we see that the associated Intune device was previously blank, and now it's filled in. So it is enrolled, it's been configured. The MTR self-deploy profile has been assigned, which I will explain in another session. And basically, this is the configuration through Autopilot with Teams Rooms. So let's finish off with some best practices. The best practices here. So in case something goes wrong, for example, you created the resource account, but you're unable to log in. For example, you can go to Microsoft Remote Connectivity Analyzer, and there's lots of stuff you can use here for Microsoft Exchange, for Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business still. But for example, we have an option here, Microsoft Teams Rooms Sign In. So you can actually put the username password and then test whether it's Android, Windows, and then you will see a full result of the test. Now, it is also important, conditional access and Intune device compliance. Now, not all settings are supported for Teams Room devices. So Microsoft luckily has a website where it explains all of the settings, whether they are supported or not. For example, require a password to unlock the mobile device, which is not supported. Teams devices don't support a password unlock, right? It makes sense, but don't use this security setting, for example. So go in there to see all of these settings. So other security considerations, obviously for the resource accounts, we do not enforce password expiration, right? Password should not expire, but now we do have the solution in the Pro Portal, which can help you a bit with that. Obviously, the Teams Rooms accounts should not have multi-factor authentication, right? Because then someone has to do something when the device starts. And you have to be aware that the device starts every night, restarts, installs security updates, and restarts. So for conditional access, so exclude these accounts from the policies, certainly from the multi-factor authentication. So make dedicated policies for those devices. I'm going to come back to this expand policies to include device attributes. I have another slide for that, so it will be a lot easier to see. Then we have to make sure that local administrative passwords are changed. There we have this Intune solution, local administrator password. And then we can use Microsoft Defender. It's been tested. And then only grant the users that need access to the admin portals. But that's just general best practices. So if you want to do proper Teams rooms on Windows conditional access, we have another one for Android. What we have to do is make sure the users and groups, so the resource accounts, we apply this policy only to the resource accounts for the Teams rooms on Windows. And we say, these are the apps, Microsoft 365, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint Online. We target it to Windows platforms. For locations, we say all trusted locations, or you can even say, like, I want to filter it down to IP addresses that we trust, potentially from within your organization. So it's more secure, you can do that. And then there's some device scoping filters. If you want, you can actually filter devices by specific attributes, like, for example, only the Polycom devices or the Logitech, whatever you need there. You can actually filter on devices in the device scoping filters. Obviously, we're going to grant access, but we require the device to be marked compliant. Now in here, obviously, Intune compliance policy comes into play. And remember, some policies are not supported, but these ones are. So code integrity, we enable it. Firewall, for example, TPM, Defender. And we say for non-compliance, we mark as non-compliant immediately and we'll assign it to the MTFR devices group. So the devices group, not the resource accounts group, right? So that's why we also need this group for the conditional access. Now the same goes for the Android conditional access policies, although it's a little bit different. So again, the resource accounts here, the same apps that we want, we target the Android platform. Again, all trust locations, or we filter on IP addresses. And then we can also do device scope filters the same way. And we have to configure device code flow. That's the way AOSP logs into the device. And then in Intune, where we grant the access and require marked as compliant. And then we have some other settings here. We block rooted devices. Minimum OS is 10. And we assign it to the device resource account. And potentially also some scoping filters if you want. So that's it for this session. Thank you very much.